This is the place I want to be. According to rival Sam Spiegelman, that's the overall sentiment for a majority of the recruits on campus this past weekend for Texas Tech. In today's video, we'll discuss 4 recruits that are standing out for the Red Raiders, and the Red Raiders may be in a good position to land. Who are they? Well, one of them is the #1 overall wide receiver in the state of Texas. Let's discuss. Hey, how's it going, everybody? It's RC Maxfield here for the Red and Black Report. Appreciate y'all tuning in to another Texas Tech football recruiting video here on the channel. If you want more of these videos, well, it's very simple. Just be sure to like the video and hit that subscribe button to join the largest group of Texas Tech fans on YouTube right here in the Red and Black Report. Now, as we discussed last week here on the channel, this past weekend for Texas Tech was a pretty big one when it comes to the recruiting trail and specifically high school recruiting. Now, there were some big-time names and some names that are starting to catch wind in their respective classes, but let's go ahead and discuss the #1 overall wide receiver in the state of Texas as he was on campus this past weekend visiting the Red Raiders. You can see it on your screen right there. It is Julian Caldwell. He is the #1 wide receiver in the state of Texas, as I mentioned, and the number 62 overall player in the class of 2027, that according to On3 and Rivals, and the number 10 overall, wide receiver in the class of 2027. Now, there is a laundry list of teams highly interested in him, including the likes of Texas, Texas A&M, Oregon, and many, many others. But the Red Raiders, according to Rivals Sam Spiegelman, are making him a priority. And best for, Texas Tech is he's going on a visit this weekend to SMU, it sounds like, but he will be back on campus for the BYU matchup for Texas Tech, hopefully after the Red Raiders take care of business up in Manhattan, Kansas against the Kansas State Wildcats. Julian Caldwell is a name to monitor, and as it stands right now, sounds like is a major, major priority for the Red Raiders in the class of 2027. Now, the next 2 guys we're going to talk about here on the channel are in the trenches, and I have to give a ton of credit to Texas Tech, James Blanchard, Joey McGuire, Brian Nance, all of those guys that are kind of in charge of what's going on for this Texas Tech roster, right? So when you look at what's going on for the Red Raiders in the class of 2027, you've already got Jalen Brewster, who is the #1 overall player in the class of 2027. You've landed a guy in Adrian Redmond, who is going to skyrocket, in my opinion, up the rankings and maybe end up in that top 75 range when it's all said and done. But these next 2 guys that we're going to talk about are not highly touted in the sense of, I guess, star rankings, right? But they are guys that Texas Tech has evaluated, identified, are in, really, maybe most importantly, have made a priority in the class of 2027. Let's go get the latest one on your screen right now. It is, as I scroll down just a little bit, Amari Vickerson. There you go. We've talked about him a couple of times here on the channel. And now the latest when it comes to Amari Vickerson is that of he visited Michigan State this past weekend when Texas Tech played Oklahoma State. And that should be no surprise to anyone, as his dad actually played at Michigan State. So there's obviously some ties there. But he lives down in Houston, and the Red Raiders are making him a priority when it comes to the class of 2027. They think they can develop him. He's 6'3", 260 right now, 16, 17 years old, but listed as a guy that is a top 45 defensive lineman in the class of 2027, but with the potential to really elevate that ranking when it's all said and done. He is a guy that Texas Tech feels confident in, according to multiple experts when it comes to the national recruiting scene. And actually, I believe it's Rivals, and Sam Spiegelman has put in his prediction for Texas Tech to land him in some kind of capacity. We'll keep you updated on that front, but he is a name to watch, is Amari Vickerson, as Texas Tech has made him yet another priority for the class of 2027, and they want to add him to that already loaded defensive line class for the Red Raiders in 2027, obviously led by the #1 overall player in the class of 2027 in Jalen Brewster from Cedar Hill. All right, we move on to really one of the latest names in the 2027 class that Texas Tech has been heavily linked to, and that is Mason Joshua. He was on campus this past weekend against Oklahoma State. It was his first visit to the 806 since being offered by Texas Tech really in the past 2-3 months. Okay, he is from Forney in the DFW area. He is 6'5", 265, and I think there's body size in terms of the composition that he has where he can gain, no joke, maybe 50, 55 more pounds. I think he's athletic enough for it, and there's a frame for it as well. He has become a priority for Texas Tech, and I don't think he is going to stay at 6'7" when it comes to the national ranking that he has currently. I think he's going to get close to that 300 range once everything is said and done. Again, the Red Raiders, James Blanchard, Brian Nance, they have routinely identified guys that maybe haven't had a high ranking early on in their recruitment, but then as soon as Texas Tech gets involved and everybody's like, oh, wait a minute, why is Texas Tech scouting this guy? Oh, there must be something there. Typically, they skyrocket up the rankings and get into that 4-star range. And I think this could be another one of those guys. And Mason Joshua, again, 2027 interior offensive lineman, just a freak of an athlete for his size. He was on campus this past weekend against Oklahoma State, 6'5", 265 from Forney. He is a name to monitor for the Red Raiders in the class of 2027. Now, the biggest name in 2027 right now for the Red Raiders is that of Kavian Bryant. He is the #1 overall quarterback in the class of 2027 and a name that has been heavily linked to the Red Raiders really since his recruitment started picking up this past year, okay? Florida State is in the mix. Colorado is in the mix. There's a couple other teams, including SMU and Texas, but it sounds like the Red Raiders, SMU, and then Colorado are the names to watch, including Florida State, who may try and make a late push here, but it sounds like he's going to stay within the state of Texas, at least from the current reporting, I should say, that we have right now. The Red Raiders are thought to be the favorites. Now, he is intending to commit here in the not-too-distant future. And the intended date for him to commit, had to make sure on my notes down below, is November 1st, which is the day that Texas Tech heads up to Manhattan and hopefully beats the Kansas State Wildcats there to secure another Big 12 win. That is what I'm monitoring most in terms of the recruiting this week for Texas Tech is can they land yet another #1 overall player at their respective position in the class of 2027. You have to think about what Texas Tech has done so far in that class. They landed LaDainian Guyton, who has since reclassified to the class of 2026, but he was the #1 overall player at, well, not only his position, but in that class before he reclassified was the #1 overall edge in the class of 2027. Now you've got the #1 overall player yet again with the updated rankings and the #1 overall defensive lineman in that class already in Jalen Brewster. Now you could potentially add yet another #1 overall player at their respective position in Kavian Bryant, as he is expected to announce his college commitment on Saturday, November 1st. The timing, not too sure about what time of the day it's going to be, but that's the expectation as of right now. The other name that I am looking at for Texas Tech is that of Julian Caldwell, the #1 overall wide receiver in the class of 2027. And the state of Texas, I should say. He's the top 10 wide receiver in the class of 2027 overall, right? But it's no coincidence that he has a lot of interest and Texas Tech is making a priority of him in his recruiting process while they are also focusing on potentially landing the #1 overall quarterback in the said class of 2027 in Kavian Bryant. Maybe there's a pairing there. It typically works out like that. We'll see if it works in this way for the Red Raiders in this circumstance. But again, that's another reason to like the video and hit that subscribe button. We'll keep you updated on everything you need to know when it comes to big-time recruiting news in the 806 for Texas Tech football. All right, that's going to do it for today's video. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Once again, be sure to like the video and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already for 100% free, not only Texas Tech football news, but men's basketball news as they are about to tip off. Just a week away from tip-off out in the 806 is Red Raider basketball. Very excited about that. I know you are as well. So be sure to join the RBR squad today to stay in the know on everything you need to know. Portal, high school recruiting news, gridiron, hardwood, doesn't matter. We've got you covered right here on the RBR. All right. That's going to do it for today's video. I'm RC Maxfield reminding you, as always, stay safe in Recom Tech.